This is the Kindness Matters podcast, a space for stories that inspire, challenge, and bring us a little closer together. If you've been looking for a reminder of the good in people, you're in the right place, because kindness matters, and so do you.
It's kindness we are.
Hey, hello, and welcome everybody to the Kindness Matters podcast. I am so happy that you are here. I'm your host, Mike Rathbun, and I know that each and every one of us, we only have so many hours in a day, and the fact that you chose to take a portion of one of those hours to listen in on this podcast means the world to me, and I thank you so much for doing that. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the way we speak to each other, right? Um, have you ever done something or said something that was inappropriate, and then when you thought about why you said that, it kind of went back to something that you were told as a child? That's kind of what we're talking about here. And let me tell you about my guest. My guest is Bobbi Chegwyn. She grew up in Australia, and she came to the U.S. And believe it or not, she decided to drive a school bus to better understand her new community. And what she saw in those kids that she was driving around stuck with her. Emotions that they didn't have words for, showing up in ways that often got misunderstood. And now she brings the stories that she heard from those kids into her set of children's books it's a series called Radical Ray. And it helps kids build emotional intelligence during one of the most important stages of their lives. Today we're talking about the way we speak to each other and why it matters more than we think. Welcome to the show, Bobbi. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be chatting with you today.
Yes, we can talk about this but you spent like 20 years working as, was it a therapist or?
Sorry, you froze there a little bit. You spent 20 years?
Oh, you spent 20 years before you came to the U.S. and before you started driving a bus. You were working with mostly adults in was it a therapy type situation?
It was a life coaching situation, and I got my certification from the Coaching Institute in Melbourne back in 2008. And at that time, I was going through a separation and a divorce, and I have always worked best coaching people through something that I'm personally going through because it's easy to show up as your
Sure.
authentic. You don't have to second guess what you're doing. And so back in Australia, I was coaching women in transition, which was my story at the time. And then after we moved over to the United States 8 years ago for my husband's work, I had driven the school bus, and after that period, my father had passed away, and I was kind of at a loss again as to what I was going to do. So I went to a retreat over in Oregon, and I found out through a week's intensive chatting with these two amazing women that there was a part of me, my 9-year-old self, that needed to be acknowledged, accepted, healed. And so I came back from that, and as was the case once before, I thought, okay, if I'm going to work on myself, I'm going to take that age group along for the ride, pardon the pun, from the bus.
Yeah.
But I decided I'm going to write this in story form because I've been involved in this arena for so long now. And I think so many of us, from my generation anyway, have sought therapy or started to figure ourselves out or done self-inventory when we're well into our 30s, 40s, 50s, and even later on in life. And from driving the school bus, I knew these kids were smart. They were little sponges that really soaked up new ideas. And I thought that's the age group I want to write for. I want to prepare them with an emotional toolkit via storytelling, with a character that hopefully becomes their little mate, and they can remember what Ray might have chosen to do or the difficulties and challenges that he went through in his stories, and apply an understanding of what worked for him into their day-to-day life as they get older.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit more about your experience driving the school bus and what you heard from those kids. I mean,
Yeah, sure. Well,
because
it
because that
started
was part of
because
your decision too.
yeah, yeah. So when I started driving the bus and after I got my route and I was licensed, I knew I had to do something more than just pulling up at a bus stop, opening a door, flashing my lights. There had to be more to it. So I went to my supervisor and I said, can I do something with this group of kids? I want to name it the Kind Bus, and I'd like to do things, activities and different rewards and things like that. That goes back to that value of kindness, because I think at that age, the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, being kind, they know what it means, and we could take every bus rule and link it back to that. So, speaking nicely to each other is kind, sharing your seat is kind, respecting the bus rules is kind. So they could link that word back to that value of kindness, or
Yeah.
they could link the rules back to that. So we started doing that, and it turned out really, really fantastic. We'd have a Kind Bus Rider of the Week award. We would do donation drives for those less fortunate in our area. It was just a really fun bus. It didn't
Yeah.
mean that we had challenges, because at times we did. But getting back to your question, was what I did notice most of all were the kids who, I guess, had been labeled as challenging or with problematic behavior. And I decided, one example was this boy who he was just very loud, and he would kind of be up in everyone's faces, and he lives in my neighborhood. Actually, all the kids do. I was fortunate enough to drive the
Wow.
kids in this neighborhood. Anyway, I thought, okay, this guy just likes to use, this boy, I should say, likes to use his voice, and he's got a really strong voice, and he has kind of that leadership quality in him. So I said, would you like to become our railroad monitor? It's not a thing, but I once saw an episode of the Brady Bunch where Bobby Brady was made hall monitor. So we're going to have a railroad monitor, because when we used to come up to a railroad track, he used to shout out this little ditty that went something like, if I can recall, something like, lights on, lips up, we're coming to a railway stop. And so I said, that's going to be your job. So I need you to be really sensible on the bus, because the kids are going to be looking at you. And we'd approach the railway tracks and he would shout out. And then he would tell me if anyone was speaking, which was helpful, because you have to listen out for trains coming. It's,
Yeah.
it is a safety requirement. And then I thought, I'm going to get him a badge. So I made a railroad monitor badge and I sent it to his mother and told her what it was going to be about. And it's funny, because that was just one example of acknowledging this, the things that were being labeled currently as problematic, and seeing how we could work with that to spin it so it had a really valuable impact. And this was one kid, he turned it around. He became quite proud of himself, and he took his job very seriously. So yeah, that was one of the stories.
So giving him something to do on the bus really brought out those leadership qualities in him, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And I often think with what I witnessed on the school bus was there was just nowhere in that bus for them to necessarily channel parts of themselves. And
Yeah.
so if we could rework it, we reworked it.
Cool. And that's so clever. I mean, n probably no other bus driver in your district had thought of that.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't think anyone else was really doing that sort of thing. But look, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was honestly one of the best times of my life.
Yeah. So, did you learn anything from the kids? Did they teach you anything about honesty or conflict or the need to feel understood?
It really was just the idea that behavior, I don't think there's any such thing as a bad behaved kid. I think there's behavior that stems from a belief about themselves, which might then transition into a thought, which will produce an emotion. That emotion will then contribute to an action that will then have an outcome. So the beliefs with these kids could be helpful or unhelpful. There were plenty of kids who were extremely well behaved and friendly. Then there were the other kids that, for instance, were, I guess, exhibiting behaviors that didn't contribute to the safety of me as the driver, the other kids, and the traffic on the road. However, I think it's when you separate the child from the behavior and think, well, that's coming from somewhere else. So in this other kid's instance, if we can give him something to do with that behavior, then it really works. But it always stems from somewhere. I mean, your behavior, my behavior, Donald Trump's behavior, it all it all stems from a belief that we hold about ourselves, life, and others.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times that goes back to what we were told as kids, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what gets in the way of communication. So, what are some of the biggest barriers to healthy conversations? Assumptions, urgency, shame, fear of being wrong.
I
What
think
what are some
also
of them?
one thing that, yeah, what I notice the most is our filters. So there are millions of bits of information coming to us at any given time, but we're filtering between 7 and 9 bits of information any given second.
Oh, wow.
But those filters are going to be based on our upbringing, our culture, religion, maybe schooling, anything like that. So I think I think accepting that we're all filtering based on what we've been given in life so far allows us to understand that someone isn't necessarily wrong. They just have that different set of filters and values based on how they grew up, what information
Right.
they were given, who their role models were.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so how do tone or timing and body language, how can those matter as much as what we actually say, do you think?
Well, it's funny because the spoken word is not by any means all of the language and the words that we are speaking. I think it matters a lot more. This is why when people text, they might read something via their filters and think, well, oh my gosh, this person's angry at me or I've done something wrong. But if that person was standing in front of them and using a friendly tone to their voice and their body language was open, exactly smiling, then
Right.
you would be able to see. Um, it's funny because my girls are now 26 and 22, and they admonish me for putting a full stop, a period at the end of my sentences in text because they think that means that I'm sort of angry and agitated. And
Oh,
it's like,
really?
no, I just love punctuation.
Yes, I'm always doing that. And I make sure I capitalize the first letter of a new sentence and all that good stuff.
Yes,
And
yes.
I didn't realize that could be seen as being mad.
Well, apparently so. It's just a
Apparently
generational
so.
thing,
There
honestly.
you go. Yeah, but it's true though. I mean, a text message or a chat on Facebook or what have you, whatever the case might be, you cannot convey any kind of emotion in there. And you have to be very,
Absolutely.
very
And
careful, don't you?
you really, really do. I think emojis help because you can stick a little smiley face on the end of your sentence or a
That's
thumbs
true.
up or something. So that does help, but it really is. You were very limited just with what you were typing because there is so much more to language than just the words you're using.
Yeah, because I know for a fact when my wife says, "Fine," everything is
Oh, yeah,
definitely
not
not
fine.
fine.
No, no, that's a classic, I think.
Yeah. Oh, so let's talk about how we talk to kids, okay?
Mhm.
Kids and teens. How can adults model communication that helps children name feelings instead of acting them out?
Mm. I think asking open ended questions like, are you feeling okay? Yes, no. That's a closed question. A yes
Yeah.
or no answer is a closed question. What was hard for you today? What was challenging? Was there anything that was fantastic that happened to you today? I think
Yeah.
really encouraging children to answer with more than a yes or no. I think the great things about books or bibliotherapy, which is reading stories that do help in a therapeutic way, such as the Radical Ray series. I think what's really great about that sitting down and reading with your child, because it's a lot easier, especially for young boys, to talk about what the character is feeling or what might be
Oh,
happening with the character because they're not having to take it on themselves and they're not necessarily put in that vulnerable position. So the mom, dad, caregiver, grandparent can say, what do you think Ray was feeling in that moment? Have you ever felt that way? What did that look like for you? So I think definitely open-ended questions are a great place to start,
yeah. Yeah, and I'm just as guilty of that when okay, my youngest is 32 this year, I think.
right?
So, but when they would come home from school, "How was your day?" "Fine." And that was the end of the conversation. It shouldn't have been, but it was too often.
I think
So
there often is a need, though, especially when kids come home from school. And I've seen it when partners have come home from work.
mm,
There is a definite need for decompression. There is a definite need to cut off from the school day, have that break, have that breather, and then reemerge as that family member for sure.
yeah, yeah. So how should a parent or an adult respond when a child is angry or embarrassed or shut down? Because we see that a lot.
I think yeah, yeah, and look, I can only really talk about what I've learnt. However, it's accepting that all emotions have a purpose. They're there to show the child something. They can be used in a way that is really beneficial if the child is allowed to work through that emotion and not told to suppress it. I don't know how many people my age were told to be quiet, calm down, don't do this, be a good girl, be a good boy. And we kind of cut off that need to express what is inside. Now, it doesn't mean that a child can pick up your favorite vase and throw it against the wall, but if we start young enough to not squash the child's emotion or aim to try and compartmentalize it into this is what you're doing, we need to really just figure out what is going on
Yeah.
inside. Asking these questions, obviously, the questions will get more in depth the older the child gets, but all emotions, this has been the biggest thing that I've probably learned in all these years is that all emotions have something to teach us about ourselves, about what we value, about what's important to us, about what we don't like, what we do like. And so you'll know if you I guess if we're feeling an emotion that we would label unhelpful inside, we might be able to ask ourselves as an adult, for instance, okay, how am I not aligned in this moment with my top 5 values for how I want to live my life and who I want to be?
Right.
So that's a great opportunity to dig deeper and say, okay, this is what I'm finding out about me at the moment, rather than pushing it down and ignoring it. Because I do think I'm very much of a believer that a lot of illnesses may stem from repressed emotions, especially mental health issues, anxiety. I don't know, that might come out in a physical problem as well. But I do think it's really important to purge any emotion that comes up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. That was great. Um, so let's talk about the books. When did you decide to write that this is what you wanted to do, that this is what you wanted to
Yeah.
channel?
Yeah. So I came home from that retreat in Oregon and I had this niggling feeling that I wanted to do it, but I thought, "Oh, do I wanna go down this path? That seems like a lot of work when, I've just gotta focus on my inner child." But I've always loved to write, and I've always loved to tell stories, and it just evolved from that. And what I have found now that after I've completed a book, I really miss that suburb. I really miss that family unit. I miss his school friends. I miss that community. And it's funny, I said to my husband the other day, this is, it's like he's my fictional son. I love being involved in his life and I get quite emotional about how far this boy is coming in life and what he's been able to cope with and what he's learned. But I guess at the end of the day, that's just me talking to my own 9-year-old self. So, yeah, that's kinda interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So let's introduce it because there's a central cast of characters always, right? There's Ray, obviously,
Yes,
and then his
yes.
family,
So
right?
Ray is it when what's that?
I said, and then his family, but you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Ray doesn't come from a stereotypical family. He lives with his mum, who's a single mother, and his grandmother, Leela. And so they're the central characters. He has a dog called Atlas, then his friends at school, his teachers, and people in his community as well. But it's
Yeah.
really it's and I never it was never a conscious decision to have Ray with a single mum and a grandma, but then I thought about it. I love that this young boy is being raised by 2 really strong women. That's cool
Yeah.
because so many of us don't have, that nuclear family going on.
Oh, for sure. So the first book was what?
In relation to title or
Yeah, with title, subject matter, because you do have different
Okay.
subjects over the course of the titles, right?
I do. So I apologize because I've given my copies, they've all been distributed. So I do have my proof copies here. So they've got a label across them saying not for resale. Anyway, so this is book one. And book one is Radical Ray, Australia's little champion for big change. And that is all about kindness, empathy, inclusion. And the rad in Radical Ray comes from, at the beginning of the book, his grandmother lets him in on a secret about what radical love is because she thinks he's now old enough in third grade to understand what that is, which is pretty much loving yourself and others even when it's hard to do. And the story then flows where Ray comes across all these instances where he can utilize the concept of radical love. And then I won't give too much away, but let's just say that initiative goes far beyond his suburb of Botany in Sydney.
Nice,
And then we've got the
nice.
second one, which is Radical Ray, A Father's Return. And Ray's estranged father decides to come back into the picture. So this is for any kid, really. I mean, I would love kids, even if this is not their situation, to understand how other kids may be living when there isn't a parent at home. And Ray has to grapple with themes of trust, forgiveness,
Oh,
family dynamics, and it's what I love about these books is that they're not tied up in a bow at the end. It's as real life as I can make them. Then the third book is the too much moment, and Ray gets told something by his teacher in class that shatters his belief about himself. And then he starts to spiral in a way that maybe a 9-year-old would at this stage. And he starts to second guess who he is. And then he starts to shrink to fit in.
oh,
And that story is about how Ray, through the support and love of his grandmother and the idea of radical love, can find his way back to the person that he is, which is wonderful. And then the fourth book is No Greater Love. And in that book, Ray unfortunately deals with the sudden death of his mother. So
oh
that's for
no.
kids 10 plus, but it's done in a really honest way based on when my mum died suddenly when I was a child.
Yeah.
And again, it's not the situation isn't just explained away. So by the last chapter, everything's fine again. I hope, and I do believe that I've written it in a realistic way, in language and with ideas that children will understand.
And grief is so hard for kids to grasp sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because there's so much shock involved. And I think also, too, and Ray very much does this in that book, he lost the most important person to him. So everything that we would consider things that we don't even notice during the day, he's hyper focusing on to make sure, like the clock ticking, sorry, and
Yeah.
someone rummaging around and putting the kettle on in the morning. He's hyper focused on
Oh,
all these little things, making sure those little things are going about during his day because that's all he can look out for.
wow. Yeah. Any plans for new books?
Yeah, I'm going to write a fifth. I have written one chapter, kind of put it aside for the moment. Um, I'm thinking that will be the end of the Ray series with 5 books. I'm really wanting to, whilst I'm in the US and I'm going to be here for a few more years, I would really love to go and visit schools and connect with these elementary kids. I have seen over 30 of your states already, so I'd love to just go, even to the far flung states that aren't close to Ohio, and really just get a foot in those states and across your beautiful country and meet the kids, meet the teachers, and have a good
Yeah.
old chat with them.
Have you been to Minnesota?
I have only been to your airport.
That's close. It
Sorry,
almost counts.
but it almost counts. It's funny though, especially so the Dakotas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas. I am really drawn to that area at the moment. And then, of course, I want to do the Rockies and the states around there. And then I think, why doesn't anyone ever mention Idaho? Why? I mean, I think I'm worried that Idaho's going to feel left out. Nobody
Idaho
ever
is
really
so
talks about
beautiful.
Idaho. So that's where I want to go.
I've had a couple of guests from Idaho. As a matter of fact, they
Oh,
live in the
good.
same city, and they recently
Good.
got together. Adam
Hmm.
Schluter, he does a Monday night dinners. He has all these strangers come in and they have dinner at his house. And then Mike Baker, who works for a community hospital type setting. And I had them both on, and a couple weeks ago, I saw a Facebook post, and they were both at the same event together. I was like, "That's cool." So I
That
have
is
people I could. It's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
right. Okay.
I could
I'm
put you
glad
in
they were
touch.
able to get together.
Pardon?
I'm glad they were able to get together.
Yeah, I mean, from the same town. I've never had two guests from the same town. So that was kind of weird, but fun. So their website is meetradicalray.com, correct?
It is. Mhm.
Bobbi, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom, your hope, your what you do for you're putting so much good out into the world, and I appreciate it, and I know there's probably a lot of parents and teachers out there who also appreciate what you're doing.
Well, I thank you very much. It's been lovely speaking with you, and congratulations on all the good you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will talk soon.
Thank you.
It's kindness we all really seek. Human first.
This episode is made possible by the generous support of people like Sue Jackson, Jesse Lewis, and John Tevlin. I appreciate you so much for tuning in today. And if you found value in this episode with my guest, Bobbi Chegwyn, it would mean the world if you shared it with a friend or a family member, or took a moment to leave a comment or review. It's one of the best ways to help others discover this show as well. If you'd like to support the show and help us keep spreading the kindness, we have both tiered and one-time support options available on Buy Me a Coffee. We also have a merch shop. You'll find both links waiting for you in the show notes. And if supporting financially isn't possible right now, that's completely okay. The most meaningful way you can support the show is by doing one small, random act of kindness each day. It truly does make a difference. We'll be back again next week with another episode, but until then, remember, kindness matters, and so do you.
The same song, 'cause we're human first. Human